Two people follow the exact same program, eat the same way, train with equal effort, and one of them builds muscle noticeably faster. The reason is not luck, and it is not entirely genetics either. It is something more specific and more actionable than most people have been told. If this is your first time here, subscribe and share this with someone who has ever compared their progress to someone else's and wondered why the gap exists. This channel is built around explaining the biological variables that most fitness content acknowledges but never explains precisely enough to be useful. There is a particular frustration that belongs to people who train alongside someone making faster progress. They are doing the same things. The same sessions, the same food, the same commitment. And the other person's body is responding with a speed and magnitude that feels disproportionate to the shared effort. The instinct is to attribute this to genetics and move on, to treat the difference as fixed, unchallengeable, and beyond the reach of anything that could be done differently. For some of the variables involved, that attribution is partially correct. For others, it is an oversimplification that obscures modifiable factors that explain a significant portion of the gap, and that once understood and addressed, can meaningfully reduce it. The real answer to why some people build muscle faster is not a single variable. It is a layered biological reality with both fixed and adjustable components, and knowing which is which changes the entire approach to training and recovery. The genetic variables that are real but misunderstood genetics does influence the rate of muscle development. This is not a myth. But the mechanisms through which genetics exerts this influence are more specific than most people realize, and understanding them prevents the broad fatalism that treats any difference in progress as genetically determined and therefore fixed. The most significant genetic variable in muscle building rate is myostatin, a protein produced by muscle tissue that functions as a biological brake on muscle growth. Myostatin limits the proliferation of satellite cells, the muscle stem cells responsible for donating nuclei to growing muscle fibers and enabling their expansion. Higher myostatin expression means a tighter biological ceiling on the rate of muscle protein synthesis and hypertrophic response. Lower myostatin expression means a more permissive environment for muscle growth. Myostatin levels vary between individuals based on genetic factors, and this variation partially explains why some people respond to identical training stimulus with dramatically more muscle development than others. Individuals with naturally lower myostatin expression are not working harder. Their biology is simply applying less internal resistance to the adaptation process. A second genetic variable is fiber type distribution, the ratio of fast twitch to slow twitch muscle fibers in the major muscle groups. Fast twitch fibers are significantly more responsive to hypertrophic stimulus than slow twitch fibers. They have larger cross-sectional area potential, higher rates of protein synthesis following mechanical disruption, and greater capacity for the dimensional growth that constitutes visible muscle development. Individuals with a higher proportion of fast-twitch fibers in key muscle groups will respond to resistance training with more visible hypertrophy from the same training stimulus than individuals with a higher slow-twitch composition. These genetic factors are real. They are also not the dominant explanation for most of the variation in muscle building rates observed between people following the same program, because the behavioral and physiological variables that are entirely within an individual's control account for a larger portion of the outcome than most people who invoke genetics as an explanation have examined honestly. The anabolic hormone environment. The hormonal environment in which training occurs is one of the most powerful determinants of how rapidly the body converts training stimulus into muscle tissue, and it is more modifiable than most people recognize. Testosterone and growth hormone are the two primary anabolic hormones governing muscle protein synthesis rate, satellite cell activity, and the body's overall orientation toward tissue building versus tissue breakdown. Their baseline levels vary between individuals based on genetics, age, and sex. which accounts for the well-documented differences in muscle building rates between men and women and between younger and older individuals. But within any individual, the hormonal environment is not fixed at the genetic baseline. It is continuously influenced by the behavioral variables that either support or suppress anabolic hormone production. Sleep is the most significant of these variables. Growth hormone is secreted in pulses throughout the night, with the largest pulse occurring during the first bout of deep slow-wave sleep. Individuals consistently achieving 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep are experiencing a growth hormone environment that individuals averaging 5 to 6 hours simply are not, and this difference in overnight anabolic hormone output translates directly into different rates of muscle protein synthesis in the recovery period following identical training sessions. Training structure also influences the hormonal environment. Compound movements involving the largest muscle groups, squats, deadlifts, rows, presses, produce the greatest acute hormonal response, with significant post-exercise elevations in testosterone and growth hormone that prime the anabolic environment for the hours following the session. Individuals whose training is dominated by isolation exercises forego this systemic hormonal stimulus, receiving a more muted anabolic signal even from sessions of equivalent perceived effort. The person building muscle faster in the same program is often the person sleeping longer, training with more compound movements, and managing psychological stress more effectively, not the person with superior genetics, in many cases, but the person creating a more consistently anabolic hormonal environment through behavioral choices that compound across weeks and months. Protein utilization, the variable hiding inside the nutrition. Here is the less discussed nutritional variable that explains a portion of the muscle building rate difference that training and sleep variables alone do not fully account for. Conclusion: the difference in muscle building rates between individuals is real. Some of it is genetic, myostatin levels, fiber type distribution, hormonal baselines. These variables are genuine and they matter. But they do not account for all of the variation most people attribute to them. The hormonal environment created by sleep quality and training structure. The anabolic sensitivity influenced by protein distribution and source quality. The consistency of recovery across weeks and months that determines whether the adaptation process runs to completion or gets chronically interrupted. These are modifiable variables, ones that explain a meaningful portion of the gap between the fastest and slowest muscle builders in any given program. The honest approach is not to accept genetic attribution as a complete explanation before examining whether the behavioral and physiological variables within control have been fully optimized. In most cases, they have not. And optimizing them does not eliminate the genetic component of the difference. But it closes a significant portion of the gap, and that portion is worth the understanding required to address it. If this gave you a more accurate framework for understanding your own rate of progress, subscribe and share this with someone who has been comparing their results to someone else's without understanding which part of the difference is fixed and which part is not. Every video on this channel is built to give you that level of precision.